Hey, it's great to meet you. People have been saying, your students and others, that we should meet for a long time because there is a lot going on in Brooklyn with respect to technology law, and apparently you're it. So could you just introduce yourself and say a little bit about where are you working out of and what are you working into?
Good. All right. Well, I'm Jonathan Askin. I'm a professor at Brooklyn Law School. But more relevantly, I am the founder of something called the Brooklyn Law Incubator and Policy Clinic, where the students and I give free legal support for unfunded or bootstrapping, socially responsible, tech-oriented ventures.
Interesting.
In addition to that, we just launched something else at Brooklyn called the Center for Urban Business Entrepreneurship. It's an extension of the BLIP program, but really embedding law students in the Brooklyn startup community. So we've put an outpost in Dumbo, where we've got about 600 startups alone. Some are not startups anymore. We've got Etsy and Huge and Carrot Creative, some pretty big companies.
They feel like they've made it.
Yes. Companies that have sort of jumped into the enterprises.
So you find the value for the enterprises here is that they're getting some access to legal talent and some resources behind the clinic if they need it. So maybe it's helping to do some economic boost and some innovation boost, and for the students they get some experience, and then what they start to know what the legal market is that they're going to be working in later.
Yeah, well, so it's essentially become a win-win. For the clients, we will never represent clients if they can actually afford private counsel. Our objective is to fill that void for the folks who have great ideas, but for the lack of legal support and cannot turn their idea into a sustainable business. So we started the clinic about 7 years ago. In fact, I sort of hustled the law school into creating this program. They wanted...
As you do.
What's that?
Sure. I mean, that's... how else would you get the program?
Well, they wanted... I think the concept du jour, circa in 2007, was every law school wanted an IP clinic.
Right.
And I was teaching tech and telecom law at the law school, and I said, you know what, I'm going to give you an IP clinic. But to me, IP does not mean intellectual property alone. It means information policy, it means internet protocol, it means innovation and innovative practice.
It means I play you.
Yes, that's a good one too, yes.
You like that? And if you think about it, last night, and by the way, this legal hackathon that we're at now is very much one of the offshoots, you could say, one of the flowers that's been blossoming from the work that you've done. So at the dinner, what you'd hope people do is they get together, they chat, they talk. There was some people from DC, some law students of yours, and some people that came down from MIT, and we were over dinner, and we had the insight when one of the people was griping, or in a sense, like, it's a pain in the butt to register copyrights, a lot of it's paper, we don't like it. So we got to thinking naturally, how could you innovate it? And the insight, I think I started with a question, which was, everything on the web is copywritten. Every blog post, every photo, every media article.
Once it's captured in a moment. Yes.
Automatically, by statute. Do you think there could be some innovation within the use of copyright on the web? Could there be an auto registration to get statutory damages with a plug into WordPress, or better yet, an open framework that you can have a Drupal, WordPress, any kind of plugin, and by this framework and API system with the Copyright Office and maybe USPTO or others if there's a trademark involved, or states if there's a kind of a state trademark. You could start doing like low-cost micropayment auto registries, and maybe micropayments of a few cents if people want to reuse your photo, quote your blog post. Why not? Everything on the web is IP, as in intellectual property IP, for real, right?
So that's a great example of the value of something like a legal hackathon. That idea probably would not have come up had you not been in a community of tech-oriented lawyers sharing ideas.
So true.
So this is the dream of the adjacent possible, right? Did you ever read Stephen Johnson's Where Good Ideas Come From?
I have not read this.
I bring it up for a couple of reasons. First of all, the concept of the adjacent possible is you don't know what the possible futures can look like until you're in a room with a lot of other crazy thinkers, and you can actually bounce ideas off each other. That's why we have these pockets around why are all the great ventures coming out of these great urban centers?
Tell me.
And not coming out of isolated, garages around the world.
I'm going to say the serendipity of many minds coming together, creating possibility that they are adjacent to vaster than the sum of their individual parts.
I like to think that's probably the case. So the adjacent possible.
How can we test that?
Well, you look at where the great ventures are coming out of right now, and it's coming out of big urban centers. It's coming less from Silicon Valley, in my mind. And why is that? I think Silicon Valley is disconnected. You need a car. It's across great distances. It's actually tough for people to connect. In Brooklyn, we walk everywhere.
Right.
We're all right here within a couple of square miles of one another. In Cambridge, it's the same concept.
Same thing. Yep.
It's that dense urban community.
Oakland, actually. It's
Oakland, you
off
see
the
it,
hook now with the coders.
This is the value of the co-working incubator and accelerating spaces. We're all living in the same community. We're all look at the space. We want to do this here. We've got 20,000.
Let's take a look. Yeah. So what are we seeing here? What is this space?
So this is the new Made in New York Media Center.
What a great name.
It's
what is the Made in New York Media Center, and how does it catalyze the type of serendipitous get-togethers that create innovation?
So this is sort of an issue-specific incubator space. It's sort of a newfangled incubator. Everyone in here is supposed to be in some form or another connected to the next generation of digital storytelling.
Okay.
So it's a lot of filmmakers, documentarians, augmented reality companies. You have to broadly define if you can sort of frame yourself as a digital storyteller in some iteration.
Frame yourself.
Yes,
okay. I love that.
That's pretty good.
And then what? And there's that idea that they host things, people come, and they what?
It's a community space. This is the first hackathon we're doing here. I'm an advisor to the media center itself, and we have an understanding that we will give them creative legal support when they need that to folks in this community.
Beautiful.
But we have a space now. My students and I have put a space about 2 blocks from here, so we are equidistant from probably 5 incubators.
So the density and the urban property of having people that are in a cosmopolitan sort of like multi pluralistic and very proximate set of projects allows for these different kind of like combinations and chemicals to bubble and brew and create innovation.
And a lot of the incubators have slightly different focuses also. So we've got in downtown Brooklyn, we've got an incubator called Blue Ridge Foundation, which is focused on social entrepreneurship, and it's a lot of civic tech companies. Code for America has space there.
Okay,
TurboVote, and a couple MIT kids, MIT grads. TurboVote is transforming the way citizens participate in democratic process.
Got it. So that's more kind of civic computing as opposed to digital storytelling.
Right.
So you're getting these kind of thematic clusters, community-based clusters.
A quarter mile down the road, we have the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And think about what the Navy Yard
This is one thing I have seen. Okay. When I walked into the Brooklyn Navy Yard, I felt I was walking home to Oakland in some way.
Oh yeah, that really is.
One of our favorite
They got
sons.
dry docks there. I mean, it was fallow for 50 years.
Right. And Mitch Yoakum, one of the favorite sons of the Media Lab, he's got a slot there. Tell us about the Navy Yard and how has it become one of the points of this triangle of innovation?
We have to separate out what is going on in the Navy Yard and what's going on in something called the New Lab at the Navy Yard. The Navy Yard. Oh, I guess it's a little history on the Navy Yard. Yeah. The Navy Yard in 1944 had about 85,000 employees in this, I don't know if it's 1 square mile, it may be 1 square mile. 85,000 employees all working on building the armaments, the tanks, the ships for World War II. Yep. So it really was the manufacturing arm to turn around the war effort. After the war, it essentially laid fallow until the digital revolution. So it went from the home of the Industrial Revolution and then the military-industrial complex, and then was fallow for about 50 years, and now it's become the home of the digital industrial revolution. So you've got the pioneers of 3D printing. You look at what's going on in New Lab, which is where your friend is. Yeah. This is all former MIT robotics engineers.
It's literally true.
Yeah.
It's a riot when you go in there. The stuff that's hanging around and it's interacting with you and changing shape and color. Interestingly, part of the synergy from the last revolution, the military-industrial complex revolution, gearing up for a war footing, are these enormous cranes, so that they could kind of put the submarines,
the dry docks.
So one of the hackathons they'll be doing there in Mitch's group is this time they'll be creating a submarine. So people get together and have all sorts of different ways to do subs for environmental testing, for joyrides, or party boats, for transportation. Getting across the bay, you don't need a ferry or a helicopter. You could take a sub in theory. So they're going to literally use the gear as part of a maker movement because manufacturing is making after all.
The New Lab itself is building a new space in the Navy Yard with old scaffolding that was in fact a dry dock spot. where the ships would come in, get reconfigured, and then sent back out. Your friend's company, Mitch, Terraform One,
Yes.
is they're doing upcycled styrofoam, right?
Yep, into sort of like furniture and into all kinds of amazing things.
Another MIT robotics scientist who has moved her operation down to the Navy Yard is making kinetic furniture. So mutable furniture that can change
like
shape.
Hook you? Does it spring you up? Or kinetic in what sense?
She's got a magnetized table, a table that runs off magnets, and sort of a levitating table.
Okay.
She's got.
All right. Well, let's move forward.
Yeah.
Then. Speaking of magnetism and these forces that pull and sometimes repulse, there's been an uneasy but necessary relationship between law and lawyers and business people and innovators. It can be repulsive from time to time. The legal part can chill innovation. If it's like, you can't do that, this can be risky, that's a lot of liability. Or it can supercharge it. It can show how to. It can help with a creative effort. Can you talk a little bit about the magnetism that attracts between law clinics and innovation, and what's beginning to roll up in Europe as you apply your model here?
So I'll give you a little history on experiential legal pedagogy.
Please.
And its slow rollout into the
Kinetic
world
legal.
of entrepreneurship.
Okay.
Lawyers are, by and large, very conservative socially. Even if they are politically revolutionary or politically liberal, they are still socially conservative. They took a profession that they thought was going to give them respect and security for the remainder of their career.
Okay.
Law professors are even more conservative socially. They went to, not only are they lawyers, but they went to hide behind the ivory tower to have a socially secure life. That's not the way law operates anymore now that everything has been disrupted. Law has now been disrupted. But we are still late to the table. The same way the internet and digital media has disrupted journalism and real estate and travel. It's starting now lawyers are finally catching on that law itself is getting disrupted. So my objective was to take the experiential model of clinical education and train lawyers to think like the entrepreneurs, the digital entrepreneurs that they will be representing for the remainder of their career. We can't, so it's always been this concept that lawyers have been, I call them but lawyers in a why not world. Lawyers have always been, we are at best a necessary evil historically, putting the reins on an entrepreneur with a great idea that may butt up against traditional laws.
Right, but is the word. But have you thought about how this could all go horribly wrong? But what about the liability?
Right.
But what about the regulatory issues? What about the reasons you can't do it? It's a no energy frequently, and you're talking about a why not energy or a yes energy. And so how do you rebut or how do you unbutt, right? How do you transcend this and get people that are saying yes and how?
So this is where legal hackers emerged.
Okay.
The concept was, so in my seminar, the students were all obligated to figure out areas in which the law has not kept up with the needs of emerging ventures.
Okay, that's a target-rich environment.
Yeah,
Go
so
on.
we took it from two directions. What can we do, first of all, to morph the venture so that it abided by the law but was still pushing the envelope?
Okay.
But more importantly, what can we do to speed up legal reform systematically so that the law can better enable the needs of new ventures that traditional law had not anticipated? So that's what legal hackers has become.
So one thing I'll note there when I asked about this uneasy, repulsive sometimes relationship is that you have designed the service type and the goal and the mission to be of high value and supportive of achievement of the mission that the entrepreneurs have. So you've sort of rigged the framing of it by design. So that's one pillar. And
the goal is to find solutions, not to stop progress.
To find solutions. Yeah. Got it.
To be enablers.
Interesting. And so now, can we extract? So as we look here at the Media Lab at trying to get into this idea of a legal clinic, and we have our first legal clinical intern now. We've got a legal team building up. I'm listening very closely to where is the synergy and what is the path of greatest value and best, and easiest fit. So can you talk a little bit about what was it about your idea that was able to take root, be embraced, and now amplified in Europe? Maybe we can learn from this.
So why did Europe? Some of it was for just fortuitous circumstance.
Okay.
I had pitched the White House actually about 4 years ago to launch a network of blip-like clinics. Take the Brooklyn model and launch it in regional would-be tech centers around the country.
Got it.
So that we could provide that necessary legal support where it otherwise didn't exist.
Yeah.
So Silicon Valley has the law firms. They've got Cooley, Wilson, Gunderson. They've got law firms that can do it. They're going to represent the home run clients, though. Who's going to represent the singles, the doubles, the triples? The clients that might not be eligible for immediate VC funding or immediate free legal support in hopes of getting that venture capital funding down the line.
Right. So who's going to represent what you might call virtually all of America?
Yes. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Virtually the entire might and corpus of our economic machine in America is small and medium-sized businesses. And singles and doubles are what move the game.
Who's going to do that in
represents
Nashville?
them?
Also,
I can think of some people So what's the answer?
So the goal was to figure out how to train lawyers to function like startups, to understand that the revenue model is not secure and guaranteed and lucrative in the near term, but has potential to grow like the startup has potential to grow. And you might not hit on all of your startups, but you'll hit on enough. The VC model. If 1 out of 10 succeeds, then you succeed.
So it's a contingency payment or an equity, or how do you structure it?
So it depends on the bar rules,
and
it depends on your courage and your stomach to handle. We've got some ethical implications about us working for equity. Contingency fee, a deferred payment is one potential model, but the ability to get yourself out there and recognized in the community. So my students are all obligated to go to the meetups, to go to demonstrate that they are part of this community, that they.
Wow.
So here's what happened in my mind. All these startups were coming to me for legal support. They couldn't possibly afford me as private counsel, and I didn't have the bandwidth to take them on all pro bono.
It's only 24 hours, right?
Why not let the students who went to college with them and are now going to law school grow with them as their lawyers? They all came out of college together. Some went in to start their own ventures. Some went to law school. Can't they work? Won't they sort of the high tide raise all ships? Can't the new law students learn and grow with the new startup ventures who were their friends in college?
Yes.
That's what we've got now. So frankly, a lot of the clients that we have are the college friends of my law students.
Perfect. And isn't this in fact a description of who is going to be in charge imminently? The next generation of lawyers and business people and technologists. Went to college and came up together. It's a question on the funding before we bring it home. One of the reasons I think the Media Lab has been successful in what it does is because they, Nick Negroponte and others, initially got out ahead of the typical university model of funding and of intellectual property and of engagement with industry and others. And they created a kind of a consortium and an intellectual property agreement where the sponsors got some ability to get royalties out of the things that won, and there was the ability to kind of abstract one level from grant by grant by grant and to pool resources so that you could allow big wins that you otherwise might not have touched, and a lot more innovative ideas had room to grow. Right. I'm just speculating here. What if there was a fund? If you're circling up a bunch of lawyers and you're circling up a bunch of folks, would it be, and you don't want to have, and here's the part I want to focus on, with lawyers, unlike technologists, we, for good reasons, have a duty of loyalty. We have a duty of zealous representation. We have fiduciary duties, in effect, where we need to be working on behalf of that enterprise and what's best for them, not necessarily what's best for our contingency payment or for their quarterly profits or for their market cap, right? And so that's real. Yeah. What if there was one level of abstraction where the payments were going into a consortium of some kind, and then based on the ratings that people got when they went to the hackathon, the ratings that people got by how well their businesses did, and the ratings that are aligned with value overall for the community growth, they were paid back.
Yeah. This is one possible future for the legal profession, the virtualization of a legal cooperative, essentially.
Just so. In this case, for your incubators.
We've talked about it in different variations. So basically, can you spread out the costs and redistribute the potential revenue also? So there have been a couple different projects that we've done both with my students and externally with a couple lawyers and law firms also. There's one project, one guy who's here is a patent lawyer primarily, who's building something called Defense Mob, which is an ability to crowdfund the defense of patent litigation.
Great.
So there's one potential model.
And that's not an unusual model in industry. I know from time to time I've seen agreements between companies where they get together and do sort of a mutual assurance defense of some sort for patents.
So it's more ethically
it's real
suspect.
economics.
We have something on the plaintiff side that we were exploring. Something like crowdfunding the plaintiff side support for, say, a 1983 civil rights action. Maybe there isn't an attorney who wants to risk doing something that may fail, but has some noble impact, but is afraid to take on the client because they're probably just going to waste hundreds of hours and never make any money. If we could crowdfund that and distribute the costs, it might encourage very virtuous plaintiff side civil litigation in civil rights context, for
Fascinating.
instance.
So there may be a variety of new funding models, new resource allocation models, and new models for the engagement, I suppose, of lawyers and their clients in different types of combinations.
So I'll tell you. So one thing I think is important is what this does. What this conversation we're having, it really sort of violates the historical ethos of the lawyer.
Okay.
Lawyers have always been very
excellent,
individually minded, competitively minded. You're trained to destroy your adversaries.
Yes.
That's not what the startup community is really about. I mean, there are rivalries between firms vying for the same market, but if you look at the incubators, accelerators, it's all about collaboration. What's a hackathon about? It's about people getting together with different ideas and different approaches and collaborating together.
Yes.
Lawyers have never been collaborative people, except in clinical education.
Right. And you have your odd exceptions that maybe prove the rule in mediation and in certain little gullies of the law, but by and large it's adversarial.
Right.
Like that's the word we use, right?
But that's not a process that I think works now in a world where there's instantaneous connections. Can lawyers work virtually now? It was always in the death of the law firm, all of a sudden we are working virtually. When I look at my students, who are their best friends and allies? It's the people they went to law school with, because they learned to work to collaborate not just with their clients, but with each other.
So I suppose one of the questions going forward, and this is one that I hope you'll all ponder out there in internet land. I know I broke another violation. I looked and I spoke directly to
the fourth wall.
We know you're there. Consider this. What if we went back and made into history and took a different fork? There was a time when, was it Daniel Webster, said, when he tried to do a deal, he did not want to advocate for one side or the other. He wanted to be, quote, lawyer for the situation.
Okay.
Is this a familiar quote?
The concept is familiar. I don't know if it's Daniel Webster.
It was controversial, and it broke some paradigms. It caused some conversation, and now we've got the
rules that we have. It violates the American principle of zealous advocacy.
Yeah, the individualism, the competition.
Truth will out through zealous advocacy.
So I guess I'd like to just presence now some of the great lawyers and the jurists of our country at an earlier time, closer to the revolution, and see if we might not reinvigorate and breathe some of the life of some of these thoughts again, and to look at these questions and what would the situation be for a startup? They live in an ecology, and if you look at the client, it may be comprised of multiple players that come and go, but the boundary sphere to whom we would owe zealous advocacy, still owe that, may not be legal entity by legal entity. It may be a situation that has roles, parties, transactions, and boundaries, just like the network does. Every network, every community, the internet is comprised of networks, of systems, of services, of apps, of people. And as those things come together to form a type of transaction, a type of market, perhaps that's who it is we owe the duty to.
Well, then that begs again the emergence of new revenue models for the lawyers, because now we grew up on the concept of the client paying the lawyer for their zealous advocacy and services. Yeah. Now you're talking about a model where lawyers are now obligated to represent a bigger cause, and which I think is a very noble mission. But society has to be restructured, and maybe it comes through crowdfunding, maybe it comes through government resources. But if lawyers are going to be, every revolution, whether you like it or not, the disarray has been put back together by lawyers.
Sure.
After the American Revolution, it was the lawyers who had to come up with the Constitution and
at some point it comes down to Robert's rules and writing stuff down.
The Great Depression, it was the lawyers who came in and had to write the regs for
the Marshall Plan, etc. Yeah. Many things.
Now we've got digital revolution. So the problem is the digital revolution. We're going through a revolution and an inflection point, the likes of which the world has never ever seen. We have more and more of a need for the lawyers to come in and put some meaningful policy structure over this thing. The problem is, who's paying for this? Because it's your concept of in a world where it's not client paid, it's society paid,
Right.
how do we fairly compensate and make sure lawyers are committed to playing a role in coming up with the policy structure for this new order?
So, I'd like you just to think about something, and maybe we can come back and you think about it too. Put it in the comments. There's something between, let's just say, atomic client and society.
Yeah.
And in this great middle territory, when there are services that are critical that need to span many parties and span longitudinally over time, and many will rely upon them, another great tried and true funding mechanism, in fact, is the way we fund infrastructure.
Yeah.
And so there are consortia, there are public-private partnerships, there are quasi-public, there's many different legal ways to wrap these multi-party things. But what they do, and I know firsthand from lawyering some IT bond bills and literal infrastructure projects that go multi-year and are funded in that way. And are capital money, not operating money, to keep offices open, to keep service types open, to kind of keep the ship moving. That it can be a tremendously effective way to fractionally have everyone that's taking something from the network to have a fraction of a penny of that's almost buried in the connection charge, so that those 10,412 companies on Tuesday that interacted with the network and saw the legal briefs, got Google Hangouts, got the services, had a fraction of that go into an infrastructure fund, which was then allocated out for infrastructural services between society, but above the individual truck on the road or the individual boat in the canal. It's another funding model.
Look, I think something like that is probably inevitable. Now, if you break that apart, it almost sounds, reeks of communism to some extent, and not necessarily a dirty.
You might say that. I couldn't possibly comment.
So let me say, I've thought about that concept in different contexts. If you look at what's going on with media, the fact that the New York Times can no longer maintain its stable of investigative journalists, and we're left in a world of punditry without any real deep thought into what it is to be an investigative journalist and getting the story right.
Yes.
Someone has to step in and intercede right now, and it's either going to come through crowdfunding of investigative journalism, or it's going to come from a concerted government financial stake in supporting investigative journalism, which to some extent will violate government's own interest, or steps on potential free speech issues. But I do think there should be a model there, and I think there should be a model in policy formation for the government or the crowd to fund the need for this sort of expertise, legally trained expertise, to make sure the rules are structured properly.
Amen. And so I guess in closing, because in a sense it starts and ends with money. That's one of the ways that you look at these things. And so it's really about innovation. It's about creativity. It's about what we're trying to do. But the lawyer, and he also must note, a critical path item is the funding model too. And the funding model can be done in ways that support or detract from the vision, right? Or that feel good in the beginning but aren't really built to last. So I would just like to respectfully challenge you to challenge everyone to, in additional ways, to raise the specific question of how best to long-term institutionally fund all the clinicians in the Triangle in Brooklyn, all the lawyers in Europe, all of the people across the country and the world, that ultimately will have these multi-party funds for bounded situations, but need a way to allocate the money. And is there a way to do that is a communist way? Is there a way to do it that's a capitalist way? I bet you to some extent we're agnostic, and then to some extent you tune it in a way that spurs capitalism, communism, or other particular methods. Where those lines are and what the boundaries are and the choice points, modeling it so we can see it, have a PowerPoint deck, do some numbers on the out years for profit and loss, has not yet been done. And I perceive it's a conversation that's ripe, and it's one that can help even in the next few years. So
I think I'm working with 3 to 4 potential spokes off of that core concept. You can look at what we're doing in Europe right now.
Yes.
And in Europe, it's a socialist model, what we've got going. I pitched the European Commission to provide financial support and resources to build out Brooklyn-like clinics at 16 law schools in Europe.
Perfect.
So they're doing that. They've given us 500,000 euro to build out this network, at least to prove the concept that we can build this network in 16 regions,
Yes.
burgeoning tech centers throughout Europe, where the law students, supervised by faculty
Yep.
and private attorneys, will represent the startup community of Europe. So they're doing that. And in some extent, because of the government support, they may be leapfrogging over America in the creation of this network of shared resources between London and Amsterdam and Brussels and Berlin and Hamburg, etc.
This is an example where Europe is being more innovative and doing a great thing that
although
we're not yet doing in America.
We were historically, more advanced in the startup
Yes.
culture and more advanced, frankly, in legal pedagogy, including experiential legal pedagogy.
Sure.
Yeah. So now we've had about a 40-year head start in clinical legal education, and now they've sort of taken the model, and I think they've got it on steroids.
Beautiful.
At Brooklyn, the way we did it, because I couldn't get government financing, we prevailed upon successful graduates turned entrepreneur. We've got essentially seed funding, or upwards of $1 million from well-heeled graduates who want to prove out our concept. So they've given us money to prove. So we're essentially functioning like a startup ourselves. We've got a 2-year lead time, a 2-year runway to prove that we can build out a successful, functional legal support network for the Brooklyn startup community.
Beautiful.
And if it succeeds, we will seek other revenue models. Perhaps it's the crowd-funded model you're talking about. Perhaps it's a stake in some of the ventures.
So many options.
Yeah.
So much innovation, and we're seeing it here live in Brooklyn. So there's many lessons, and I just would ask, as we start getting back comments and ideas and questions, won't you please join us again at some point, most likely on Google Hangout, for one of our future cyber salons, and get on the show. You could have a segment on the show if you like.
I'll tell you, the scariest thing we heard 4 years ago was that the article parodying the development of the MIT's law school. MIT was going to build a law school based on the MIT conception of big data and numbers, and all the getting the brilliant MIT scientists to focus on law was terrifying to law schools, but I think brilliant and potentially revolutionary for the world. I suspect you're going to revisit the concept. I'd love to play some role in thinking out what MIT Law School ultimately looks like and the role it can do to transform law the same way it's transformed every other service and trade.
Amen. Thank you very much. And guess what? You already are. And so this segment is part of our programming stream. And so your thoughts are already part of the fabric of what is becoming the legal team of research in the Media Lab now and within MIT. And so I'm going to say you got your wish, and we thank you for it. And now in the future, we can check back more and more, and as we get iterative feedback on your comments and the questions that they raised, and you speak to those and teach us and learn. In this way, you can be one of the feature threads in the fabric of the law of MIT. And for that, we are very grateful. So thanks for your time. I know you're pressed today.
Thanks so much. No, what you're doing is scary, but incredibly exciting and invigorating. So.
Great. Okay, thanks. See you online.